When Ethan Sterling was reborn, he found himself back at the age of 27. He had a son and a daughter, and his wife was Isabella Westwood, the richest woman in the world, a woman who consistently topped the Forbes list, was named the one-woman global men most want to marry by Time magazine, and whom even the British royal family hoped a prince would marry. Everyone said he was the luckiest man alive, but the first thing he did was take the divorce papers to find her first love. He pushed the agreement in front of Sebastian Hawthorne and said calmly, "I want a divorce. Isabella is yours, and the 2 children are yours as well." Sebastian stared at him in shock, unable to believe that the man who had occupied the husband's position for 6 years would suddenly offer it up. Ethan simply added coolly, "Since they all prefer you, I'll make you all happy. All you have to do is get Isabella to sign. Once the divorce cooling-off period is over, I'll leave." This time, he would not repeat the mistakes of the past. He would no longer be the ignored Mr. Sterling. Sebastian's fingertips unconsciously traced the rim of his cup, his brow furrowed. "Ethan Sterling, what kind of game are you playing?" Watching the ever-changing expression on Sebastian's face, Ethan repeated calmly, "I'm not playing a game. I've just had enough." "Ethan, do you have any idea how many men out there would kill to be in your position?" "I know." Ethan looked him straight in the eye. "That's why I'm giving it to you." A crack finally appeared in Sebastian's composure. He stared at the agreement for a long time before finally taking it. "Fine. Since you're being so generous, I won't be polite. But remember this, once I have something, I never let it go." "Don't worry," Ethan said with a slight smile. "I will have absolutely no regrets." After all, in his previous life, he had already tasted a lifetime of loneliness. Sebastian stood up, moved to another table in the cafe, and gracefully took out his phone, his fingertips tapping lightly on the screen. When the call connected, his voice instantly softened. "Isabella, I'm at the Blue Mountain Cafe. Can you come pick me up?" Ethan sat nearby, a bitter smile touching his lips. There was a time when he called Isabella, and 9 times out of 10, her assistant would answer. But now, in less than 20 minutes, the woman who was perpetually in a meeting appeared at the cafe entrance. Through the glass window, Ethan watched Isabella stride into the cafe, her long legs accentuated by a black, high-fashion suit dress. His 6-year-old son, Julian, and 4-year-old daughter, Chloe, rushed to Sebastian the moment they saw him, showering him with hugs and kisses. "Uncle Sebastian," Chloe called out sweetly, rubbing her little face against his chest. Isabella placed a cake box on the table, her long, slender fingers pushing it gently toward him. "Your favorite chocolate flavor. I had the chef use less sugar, just for you." Sebastian's eyes lit up. "You always remember." Ethan sat in the corner, his fingers unconsciously digging into his palms. In 6 years of marriage, Isabella didn't even know what flavor he liked. In his last life, when he was sick in the hospital and craving a red bean pastry, she had her assistant buy one at random. It turned out to be mango-flavored, which he was allergic to. "What do you want for dinner tonight?" Isabella's voice was low. "French or something else?" Sebastian smiled, pulling the divorce agreement from his bag. "Before that, there's a document I'd like you to see." He opened the agreement to the signature page. "I've had my eye on a villa, but I'm a little short on liquid cash. Could you possibly?" Isabella took the fountain pen and signed her name without even looking at the contents. "Between us, why do we need to be so formal?" "Is Uncle Sebastian buying a new house?" Julian asked, his little face tilted up. "Mommy, you should buy one next door. Me and my sister want to move in with Uncle Sebastian. We don't want to be with Dad all the time." Isabella's brow furrowed slightly, but seeing the expectant looks in her children's eyes, she relented. "Then we'll buy one." "No need to go to all that trouble," Sebastian said quickly. "I'll keep 3 rooms for Julian and Chloe. And for you, you can come stay whenever you like." The 2 children cheered. Chloe even wrapped her arms around Sebastian's neck and kissed him. "Uncle Sebastian is the best 1,000 times better than Dad," Ethan's heart felt as if it were being squeezed by an invisible hand, a dull ache making it almost impossible to breathe. He saw the slight upward curve of Isabella's lips, a tenderness she had never shown him. Unable to watch any longer, he picked up his bag and turned to leave. The moment he stepped out the door, memories of his past life flooded back like a tidal wave. In his last life, he and Isabella had a marriage of corporate convenience. They had a son and a daughter, and he lived to be 62, but he was never happy. All because Isabella's heart had always belonged to her first love from her youth, Sebastian Hawthorne. After they broke up back then, Sebastian went abroad. Isabella drank for a few days, but proud as she was, she never lowered herself to win him back. Instead, she agreed to the family's arranged marriage. Isabella had been his dream as a young man. Cold and independent, which of the city's high society scions didn't dream of marrying the woman in charge of the Westwood Corporation? So when he learned of their impending marriage, he was ecstatic. But after they married, he poured everything he had into loving her, only to receive her eternal distance and indifference in return, until Sebastian returned. She didn't mention divorce to Ethan, but her gaze never left Sebastian. Worse still, both of his children adored Sebastian and grew distant from him. In his later years, Ethan was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Isabella, under the pretext of needing a quiet place to recuperate, abandoned him alone in their old mansion. On his birthday, he tremblingly called his wife and children, only to learn they were on vacation in the Maldives with Sebastian. He tried to cook himself a bowl of birthday noodles, but, confused, forgot to turn off the stove. As the flames consumed him, Ethan's last thought was of the cold look in Isabella's eyes as she placed the wedding ring on his finger. He closed his eyes in agony, his only wish that if there were a next life, he would never again waste it on her. It was already dark when Ethan returned to the villa. He didn't rest. Instead, he went straight to work, clearing out his belongings. Isabella's dresses, the children's toys, the family photos. One by one, he threw them all into cardboard boxes. "What are you doing?" Isabella's voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Ethan turned to see her standing at the door, holding the hands of their two children, her brow tightly knitted. "Why is Daddy throwing our things away?" Chloe ran over, her little face flushed with anger when she saw her teddy bear being put into a box. Julian glared at him furiously. "We just went to play with Uncle Sebastian for a little while. Do you have to be this angry?" Isabella looked at him, her gaze as cold as ever. "The children like being with Sebastian. Must you throw a tantrum over such a small thing?" "I'm not angry," Ethan said calmly. "Liar," Chloe shrieked. "You're just jealous of Uncle Sebastian, that's why you threw away my teddy bear. You're a bad dad. When I grow up, I'm moving in with Uncle Sebastian," Julian said viciously, pulling his sister's hand. "And I'll never come back to see you." Isabella didn't stop the children's outburst. She merely frowned slightly, her deep eyes sweeping over Ethan. It was the look one gives a stranger making an unreasonable scene. "That's enough," she said, her red lips parting. Her crisp voice carried an innate nobility as her long fingers nonchalantly straightened her dress. "I have a video conference with the board. Throw away whatever you want, just don't make a scene." The moment the door closed, Ethan's eyes reddened silently. His heart felt like it had been torn to shreds, every breath carrying the taste of blood. He wiped away his tears, looked at the mess on the floor, and suddenly smiled. Don't worry, he wouldn't disturb her, not for the rest of his life. After the divorce papers were signed, Ethan stopped doing any housework. He no longer woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare a nutritious breakfast for the children, nor did he wait up late for Isabella to return from her social engagements to make her a hangover soothing soup. The chores he once considered his duty were now all left to the servants. At first, no one noticed anything was wrong. Not until Julian was late for school and reprimanded by his teacher, Chloe couldn't find her homework, and Isabella's pocket watch stopped. The servants scrambled, but they could never meet the master's standards. The kitchen sink was piled with unwashed dishes, the living room was scattered with the children's toys, and the iron dresses were never quite smooth enough. The once impeccably organized house gradually descended into chaos. When Isabella pushed open the bedroom door, Ethan was leaning against the window, reading a book. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting dappled light on him. "How long are you going to keep this up?" she asked from the doorway, her voice low. Ethan closed the book and looked up at her. "I'm not keeping anything up." "Then why have you stopped managing the house?" She took a few steps closer, the faint scent of cedar from her perfume filling the air. "Are you still angry about last time?" "I'm not angry." He placed the book aside. "I just don't want to do it anymore." Isabella narrowed her eyes, her long fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "Reason? I'm tired," he said calmly. "We have servants. It's fine if I don't do it." He thought of his previous life, waking up before dawn every day. Isabella's coffee had to be exactly 185 degrees Fahrenheit, her sandwiches toasted to a perfect golden brown. The children's clothes had to be hand-washed, even their socks ironed flat. And what did he get in return? Isabella's tenderness for Sebastian, the children's affection for Uncle Sebastian, and his own lonely death on his 62nd birthday. Ethan Sterling, her voice grew cold. If you're having a tantrum, just say so. Don't act like a 3-year-old. He curled his lip into a sneer. I'm not having a tantrum. I just want to rest. Before he could finish, the door was thrown open. Julian and Chloe rushed in, their faces filled with anger. Daddy is so lazy, Chloe shrieked. We want Uncle Sebastian to take care of us, Julian chimed in. Uncle Sebastian is more patient than you, harder working than you, and 1,000,000 times better than you. Isabella's gaze remained locked on Ethan's face, as if waiting for him to relent. But he just took a deep breath and said softly, If you think he's so great, then bring him here. I have no objection. The air instantly froze. Isabella's face turned completely dark. Are you sure? Ethan took another deep breath. Absolutely sure. Let's go, Mommy, Chloe tugged impatiently at Isabella's sleeve. I want Uncle Sebastian to come over right now. With Uncle Sebastian here, we won't need you anymore, Julian made a face at Ethan. You can go leave this house. Isabella gave Ethan one last look. Seeing he remained unmoved, she turned and strode away with the children. Ethan stood where he was, listening to the sound of the car engine fading into the distance, and gently closed his eyes. Soon, he would give them what they wanted. He would leave them completely, leave this house. On his first day in the house, Sebastian directed the servants to completely rearrange the living room. This sofa is too drab. His slender fingers lightly brushed over the leather couch before turning to Isabella with a soft smile. Isabella, how about we change it for an off-white one? Without batting an eye, Isabella instructed the butler, do as Mr. Hawthorne says. Ethan stood on the landing of the staircase, watching as workers carried out the sofa she had meticulously chosen just 6 months ago. Julian and Chloe trailed behind Sebastian like two little ducklings, excitedly pointing. Uncle Sebastian, this throw pillow has to go too, the one Daddy bought is so ugly. Sebastian gently patted their heads. All right, we'll replace them all. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly, then relaxed. He had hand-stitched those pillows for Isabella when she was pregnant, stuffing them with hypoallergenic down cotton, because the children had sensitive skin when they were little. Now they were being unceremoniously tossed into the trash. In the days that followed, the house became increasingly unfamiliar. At the dinner table, Sebastian sat in what used to be Ethan's seat, thoughtfully serving the two children. Isabella would occasionally pour him a cup of coffee herself, her long fingers pushing it gently toward him, her eyes holding a softness Ethan had never received. In the evenings, the living room lights would dim, and the four of them would crowd onto the sofa to watch a movie. Chloe would be curled up in Sebastian's lap, Julian leaning on Isabella's shoulder, their laughter echoing through the room. When Ethan passed by, they didn't even glance at him, as if he were invisible. What was even more ridiculous was that Isabella, Julian, and Chloe used to be incredibly demanding about their quality of life. But now, he watched as Sebastian casually tossed her multi-million-dollar Patek Philippe watch onto the coffee table, face down, and she put it on with a doting smile. He watched the children happily, where the school uniforms Sebastian had carelessly thrown into the washing machine, their collars still stained with yesterday's sauce. He watched as Sebastian dished takeout onto plates and lied that he'd cooked it, and no one called him out. Even more laughable, they treated Sebastian, an uncle with no blood relation, better than they treated him, their own father. Sebastian, don't touch these chores. Isabella stopped Sebastian as he was about to clear the tea set, her slender fingers gently pressing on his wrist. Your hands are for playing the piano. Uncle Sebastian, let me get your bag. Julian eagerly took Sebastian's limited edition briefcase. His fawning expression one Ethan had never seen on his son's face. Mr. Hawthorne just needs to rest, the butler said respectfully, handing him a pair of Italian handmade slippers. Leave everything else to us. How ironic. He had been a stay-at-home husband in this house for 6 years, and they had taken him for granted. But the moment Sebastian arrived, he became the center of their universe. The servants whispered amongst themselves. The mistress is so good to Mr. Hawthorne. I've never seen her treat Mr. Sterling like that. The two children are so attached to him, too. I'm telling you, this house will have a new master soon enough. Ethan's heart was already dead to it all. He paid no mind to anything, just silently packed his things. Until one afternoon, when his phone began to vibrate frantically. Sir, the young master and young miss had an allergic reaction at school. An ambulance just took them to the hospital. When Ethan arrived at the hospital, the two children had already been rushed into the emergency room. Isabella stood in the hallway, her trench coat draped casually over her arm, her eyes churning with cold fury. Ethan Sterling. Her voice was low, thick with suppressed rage. What in the world are you doing? Ethan was taken aback. What? They're allergic to mangoes, didn't you know that? Isabella took a step closer, her slim yet powerful presence looming over him. Why did you let them drink mango juice? It wasn't me. Ethan looked directly into her eyes. I never buy mangoes for the house. Ever since the first time the children were hospitalized after eating mangoes, he had been extremely careful, warning everyone not to give them mangoes and even personally reviewing the school cafeteria menu. How could he make such a basic mistake? Not you, Isabella sneered. Then who was it? A servant? Or did they decide to do it to themselves? Ethan opened his mouth, about to speak, when a nurse pushed the door open. The children are awake. In the hospital room, Julian and Chloe lay on the beds, their faces pale. When they saw them enter, their eyes flickered. What happened? Isabella asked in a stern voice. The two children exchanged a glance, then suddenly pointed at Ethan in unison. It was Dad. The snacks he bought before had mangoes in them. Ethan froze, staring at them in disbelief. What did you just say? It was Dad, Chloe cried out, her voice laced with tears. He knew we were allergic and still gave them to us on purpose. Julian nodded vigorously. He's so mean. Ethan's fingers gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles turned white. Julian, Chloe, do you know what you're saying? You'd better tell the truth right now. Enough, Isabella shot up, grabbing his wrist. Ethan Sterling, is this how you act as a father? Not only did you harm them, but now you're trying to force them to lie? I didn't. Ethan's voice trembled slightly. Are you trying to say they're framing you? She sneered. How old are they? You can't even take responsibility for this. Do you even deserve to be a father? The two children suddenly burst into tears. Isabella immediately let him go and turned to comfort them, but they only cried harder, their little faces turning red. Mommy, Chloe sobbed, we feel so sick. What will make you feel better? Isabella asked softly, gently wiping away her tears. Julian looked at Ethan with red-rimmed eyes. He's allergic to mangoes, too. Make him drink mango juice, make him feel sick, too. An icy chill spread through Ethan's heart. He looked at Isabella. The coldness in her eyes sent a shiver down his spine. Fine. She stood up straight, snapped her fingers, and two bodyguards immediately entered the room. Hold him down. Before Ethan could react, he was forced into a chair. A bodyguard pinched his jaw, forcing his mouth open. A full liter of mango juice was poured down his throat. The sickeningly sweet liquid choked its way into his windpipe, and he coughed violently, his throat burning. A red rash spread across his skin at a visible rate. His face began to swell, and his breathing became increasingly difficult. He clawed at his neck in agony, his vision blurring as he looked at Isabella. She just stood there, watching coldly, with no intention of stopping it. The two children had stopped crying and were now clapping their hands excitedly. Serves you right, you should feel sick too. Before darkness overcame him, the last thing Ethan saw was the cold, indifferent look in Isabella's eyes. An unknown amount of time later, Ethan woke up in a hospital bed. His throat was raw, and the rash from the allergic reaction still lingered on his face. He heard a familiar voice from outside the room. It was Sebastian. Isabella, I honestly didn't know they were allergic. I just wanted to make them a glass of juice. It's not your fault. Isabella's voice was impossibly gentle. You didn't know? If only I had come forward to explain the truth sooner, it wouldn't have led to you misunderstanding Mr. Sterling, he said, his tone full of regret. Julian, Chloe, you too as well. It was all my fault. How could you protect me by putting all the blame on your father? The two children's pathetic voices came through clearly. Uncle Sebastian, we know we were wrong, Chloe said between sobs. We just don't like Dad. Yeah, Julian chimed in. He's always controlling us, not letting us eat snacks and making us go to bed on time. We want him to leave." Ethan's fingers clenched the bedsheet, his knuckles turning white. These were the children he had given up his own life to care for all these years. He remembered the day Julian fell ill with a fever at the age of 2. The house was empty. The secretary had told him Isabella was in an important meeting and couldn't get away. He was overwhelmed, but he had no choice but to push through it alone. Chloe had been frail since she was a baby. He had spent countless days and nights improving her diet and researching the latest medical treatments. And Isabella, because of a transnational merger, had flown abroad. But now, the 2 children he had fought so hard to care for had become the ones to hurt him the most. The pain was heart-wrenching. Tears streamed down his face, and he had to clutch his chest for a long while before he could catch his breath. Just then, his phone rang. It was the airline, calling to confirm his flight information. "Mr. Sterling, your one-way ticket to Havenwood has been issued. Would you like me to select a seat for you?" "A window seat, thank you," Ethan said, hastily wiping his tears, his voice barely a whisper. Just as he hung up, the hospital room door opened. Isabella walked in with her usual confident stride, her legs long and straight, not a single crease in her dress. "Who were you talking to?" she asked coolly. Ethan placed his phone aside. "A friend." Isabella didn't press the issue. She just stood by the bed, looking down at him. There was a mistake about what happened last time. It was Sebastian who gave them the mango juice. Her tone was as placid as if she were discussing the weather. But he didn't know, so we'll let the matter drop. Ethan's heart felt as if it were being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain almost suffocating him. When she thought it was him, she wanted to kill him. But when it was Sebastian, it was dismissed with a casual, he didn't know. He opened his mouth, wanting to question her, to scream, to unleash all the pent-up grief and resentment. But by the time the words reached his lips, all that came out was a nearly inaudible "Okay." It was as if all the strength had been drained from his body. He was so tired, so exhausted that he no longer had the desire to argue. The grievances that had once kept him up at night, the resentment that had built up day after day, now melted into a bitter, self-mocking smile. So this was the difference between being loved and not being loved. It was that simple. Isabella seemed surprised by his reaction. After a pause, she added, "The kids are going to a summer camp next week. Sebastian and I will be accompanying them. You can go home by yourself." She waited for him to beg or cry as he usually would, but Ethan just nodded calmly. "I understand." Isabella frowned, finding his reaction strange, but her phone rang at that moment. She glanced at the caller ID. "Something came up at the office. I have to go." After the door closed, Ethan finally unclenched his fists. 4 crescent-shaped, bloody marks were imprinted on his palm. Over the next few days, Ethan's phone vibrated incessantly. It was all messages from Sebastian. A stream of photos and videos documenting the joyful moments from the summer camp. In one video, Julian and Chloe proudly introduced Sebastian to their classmates. "This is our dad." The classmates' envious gasps were audible. "Wow, your dad is so handsome. A beautiful mom and a handsome dad, you're so lucky. So who usually picks you up from school?" one child asked curiously. In the video, Julian and Chloe's expressions froze for a second. "Oh, that's our housekeeper who takes care of us." Ethan's hand trembled, and the water glass he was holding fell to the floor. He slowly knelt down, staring at the shattered pieces, and suddenly laughed. So all these years, he had just been a free housekeeper. But it didn't matter. This housekeeper was about to resign. From now on, they could let their beloved dad take care of them. A week later, the butler brought Julian and Chloe back to the villa. The 2 children ran straight to the kitchen as soon as they entered, their faces beaming with undisguised pride. "Dad," Chloe called out shrilly. "Did you know? Uncle Sebastian sprained his ankle at the parent-child sports day, and Mommy was so worried." Julian eagerly added, "Mommy booked an entire hospital for Uncle Sebastian's treatment. She even postponed her company meetings to stay by his side." Ethan stood in front of the oven, quietly listening to the children's boasts, his hands steady as he put on the oven mitts. "Dad, are you even listening?" Chloe stomped her foot in frustration. "Mommy is so nice to Uncle Sebastian, much nicer than to you," the oven timer dinged, cutting her off. A sweet aroma instantly filled the kitchen. The 2 children's eyes lit up and they immediately rushed over. "It's cake." Julian stood on his tiptoes. "I want some." Ethan took out the baking tray. The edges of the cake were slightly burnt. He frowned and dumped it directly into the trash can. "Ah," Chloe shrieked. "Why did you throw it away?" "It's burnt, you can't eat it," Ethan said calmly. "You're lying." Julian kicked the trash can angrily. "You did it on purpose. You're still mad at us about last time, so you don't want to give us any bad dad?" Chloe's little face turned red. "We don't have a dad like you." Ethan took off the oven mitts, his heart feeling as if it were being squeezed by an invisible hand. He looked at the two children he had cared for with all his being and suddenly felt they were complete strangers. "Good," he said softly, "because I don't have children like you. From now on, go find Sebastian." With that, he turned and walked towards the stairs. Behind him came the hysterical screams of the two children. "We hate you, we'll always hate you." Ethan's steps faltered for a moment, but he didn't turn back. Just as he stepped onto the third stair, he felt a sudden, violent push from behind. Go to hell. The world spun as his body tumbled heavily down the stairs. Excruciating pain instantly engulfed him. A warm liquid trickled down from his forehead, blurring his vision. The two children stood at the top of the stairs, their faces twisted into malicious smiles. "Serves you right," Chloe clapped her hands. "That's what you get for not giving us cake." Julian made a face. Ethan struggled to push himself up, blood dripping from his chin onto the floor. He looked at these two little demons and couldn't reconcile them with the children he had fought desperately to save when they were on the brink of death in the hospital. The front door was suddenly thrown open. "What's going on?" Isabella's low voice came from the entrance, with Sebastian right behind her. All three of them froze at the sight. "Mommy!" The two children's expressions changed in an instant. They ran over, crying, and threw themselves at her. "Daddy threw the cake away and wouldn't let us eat it, and he said he doesn't want us anymore." "Boo-hoo!" Isabella's gaze fell on the cake in the trash can, then shifted to the blood-covered Ethan, her brow furrowed. "Ethan Sterling, why must you pick a fight with two children?" Her voice was as cold as ice. "To say such things to your own flesh and blood, do you deserve to be a father?" Ethan pushed himself up against the wall, the blood staining his collar red. He looked at Isabella and suddenly laughed. "In your eyes, when have I ever deserved it?" His voice was hoarse. "Haven't you always treated me as nothing more than a tool for raising children?" Isabella's pupils contracted. "Since the husband you want is Sebastian," Ethan wiped the blood from his face, "and the children only want him as their father, then I'll step down and let your family of 4 be happy together." The air instantly froze. Isabella's face turned incredibly grim. She stared at Ethan as if truly seeing him for the first time. "Ethan Sterling, don't forget," her voice was low and frigid, "our families had a corporate arrangement. There were never any feelings involved. What do you want from me?" "Love," she sneered. "I'm sorry, I can't give you that." Ethan laughed at her words, but as he laughed, tears began to fall. Yes, she was right. He was the fool, the idiot, to think he could bring a goddess down from her pedestal. Isabella had indeed been brought down, but not by him. He should have known all along. "Isabella, that's enough." Sebastian intervened at the right moment, taking her arm. "The children are frightened. Let's take them upstairs." Isabella gave Ethan a deep look before finally turning, picking up a child in each arm and leaving with Sebastian. Ethan watched their departing figures, blood still dripping from his wounds. He was filled with regret now. Regret for marrying Isabella, regret for having those two children. In this life, he would never make the same mistake again. From this day forward, he would live only for himself. 3 days later, it was Julian's birthday. The party was held in the most luxurious hotel in the city center. Crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant glow, and a champagne tower sparkled in the middle of the ballroom. As usual, Isabella had booked the entire floor for Julian's grand birthday celebration. Ethan stood in a corner, watching Julian and Chloe hold Sebastian's hands, one on each side, flitting around him like 2 cheerful birds. The children clung to Sebastian the entire time, deliberately ignoring him, their biological father. Isabella stood not far away, her slender fingers holding a champagne flute, her gaze often falling on Sebastian with a tenderness he had never received. Miss Westwood is so devoted. After all these years, she still only has eyes for Mr. Hawthorne. Isn't it the truth? And the children take after her, they only have eyes for their Uncle Sebastian. The guest's whispers reached Ethan's ears clearly. Miss Westwood, Mr. Hawthorne, and I were all in university together. Back when they were a couple, it was the talk of the town. A man in a well-tailored suit said in a low voice. They were just short of getting engaged right after graduation. No wonder, someone next to him exclaimed in realization. A first love is a first love. Even without the title of husband, he'll always be the most important one. Some people scheme their way in, but what's the point? Another guest said, glancing contemptuously at Ethan. So what if he has kids? He still can't win his wife's heart. I bet he's destined for a lonely life. Ethan listened quietly, his heart feeling as if it were encased in a thick layer of ice heavy, but no longer painful. He took a deep breath and turned towards the elevator. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, a hand shot out to stop them. Sebastian stepped in, a slight smile on his lips. The cooling-off period ends in 3 days, he said, looking directly into Ethan's eyes. You will honor our agreement and leave, won't you? Ethan pressed the button for the first floor. Of course. I want to leave more than anyone. A satisfied smile finally appeared on Sebastian's face. Don't worry, I'll take good care of this family for you. After all, Isabella and the children don't like you. They'll slowly forget you. The elevator descended smoothly. Ethan didn't answer. Suddenly, boom, with a deafening crash, the elevator jolted violently and then plunged into darkness. Ah, Sebastian screamed, fumbling for his phone. Isabella helped the elevators broken. Ethan was thrown against the wall. A sharp pain shot through his forehead and a warm liquid streamed down his face. After what felt like an eternity, he heard the chaotic sound of footsteps outside. Is anyone in there okay? A rescuer's voice called through the elevator doors. Help us, Sebastian banged on the doors. My leg is trapped, the grating sound of metal being pried apart filled the air, and a blinding beam of light shone in. A rescuer peered inside, his expression grave. Miss Westwood, both gentlemen have their legs pinned by the warped door. But time is critical, we can only rescue one at a time. Who do you want us to save first? Through his blurry vision, Ethan saw Isabella standing behind the rescuer with their 2 children. Her gaze fell on Sebastian, and without a moment's hesitation, she said, Save Sebastian. Save Uncle Sebastian first, Julian and Chloe cried, tugging at the rescuer's sleeve. Hurry and save him, the rescuer frowned. Miss Westwood, Master Julian, Miss Chloe, the other gentleman is more severely injured. We recommend rescuing him first. I said, save Sebastian. Isabella's voice was as cold as ice. The rescuer sighed and had no choice but to reach for Sebastian. Ethan watched as they carefully pulled Sebastian out. The elevator door, now missing half its support, let out a terrifying groan crash. The twisted metal slammed down on his leg, and a searing, bone-deep pain shot through his entire body. The last thing he saw was Isabella's back as she helped Sebastian away, and the joyous, triumphant looks on his children's faces. Then darkness completely consumed his consciousness. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the stark white light made him squint instinctively. The smell of disinfectant filled his nostrils, and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed in his ears. You're awake, a doctor came over to check his pupils. You have 3 broken ribs. It's a good thing you were brought in when you were, or you might not have made it. Ethan stared blankly at the ceiling, the final moments before the elevator fell replaying in his mind. Isabella had chosen to save Sebastian without hesitation. As the warped door crashed down on him, she hadn't even glanced back. He tried to move, and a sharp pain immediately shot from his chest through his entire body. But strangely, he couldn't shed a single tear. Perhaps the pain was so extreme that even his heart had gone numb. 3 days later, Isabella came to pick him up from the hospital. She stood at the door of his room, impeccably dressed in a suit, her gaze falling on his bandaged chest. She was silent for a long time before finally speaking. Sebastian still needs to play the piano. I couldn't let anything happen to his legs. Ethan slowly looked up at her. So, you had to be the one to take the fall, she said calmly, as if discussing the weather. You're a stay-at-home husband. Even if you're not as mobile, it's not a big deal. Ethan didn't speak. For the first time, he saw the woman he had loved for half his life with perfect clarity. Her features were as elegant as a goddess's, but her eyes had never held a reflection of him. Isabella, he said, his voice hoarse. If I had died that day, would you have cared? Isabella's brow furrowed even deeper. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a black credit card from her suit pocket and placed it on the bedside table. Don't ask such meaningless questions. This is for compensation. As long as you behave yourself and raise the 2 children, you will always be my husband. Ethan suddenly smiled. In his previous life, he had carried the title of her husband to his grave, but what good did it do? He was the one who grew old alone, the one who was forgotten, the one who was consumed by fire. So, in this life, he had no desire to be her husband anymore. He would live a better, brighter life. He would find someone who truly loved him. He could no longer hold it back. The words were about to burst from his lips to tell her he was done with her. "Isabella, His phone rang, cutting him off. Isabella answered it. Sebastian's gentle voice came through the receiver. "Isabella, the kids and I are waiting for you at the restaurant. We have a surprise." Her expression softened instantly. "I'll be right there." Hanging up, Isabella glanced at her watch, her tone turning cold once more. "Something came up. I have to go. The driver is waiting for you downstairs." As her slender figure turned and walked away, Ethan's fingers unconsciously dug into his palm. In the end, he didn't try to stop her. It didn't matter. She would soon find out from Sebastian that the divorce was final. He didn't want her anymore, nor did he want the 2 children who treated him like a stranger. "Mrs. Davison," Ethan pressed the call button. "Please have my luggage taken to the airport." An hour later, he had deleted all of Isabella's contact information and left the black card in the hospital room's drawer. As the plane took off, the clouds outside the window were stained a brilliant golden red by the setting sun. Ethan looked at the magnificent sky and closed his eyes with a smile. In this life, he would never again compromise himself for anyone. Let all those days of humbling himself for love disappear with this plane, forever lost beyond the clouds. Awaiting him was a brand new future, one that belonged only to him. Ethan moved to Havenwood, a city that, while unfamiliar, gave him a sense of security. After 2 weeks of careful research, he opened an old bookstore named Sterling Books on a quiet street in the Old Town District. The shop wasn't large, but it had wonderful natural light. He spent 3 months renovating it, transforming the once dilapidated space into a cozy reading nook. The rainy season in Havenwood was long. Ethan stood by the bookstore's glass door, staring blankly at the drizzling rain outside. Suddenly, the wind chime by the door tinkled. "Welcome," he said, turning instinctively, only to be slightly taken aback by the person who had entered. The woman standing at the door was tall and slender, holding a long-handled black umbrella from which raindrops dripped onto the floor. She held a little girl of about 5 or 6, who had her hair in 2 small pigtails and was shyly shrinking into her embrace. "Excuse me, do you have any picture books suitable for this age?" the woman asked in a gentle voice as she closed her umbrella. Only then did Ethan get a clear look at her face-defined features, eyes like a painting, with long hair cascading lazily over her shoulders and a hint of a smile in her eyes. He was stunned. "Clara Sutton, my senior." The woman was clearly taken aback as well. After studying him for a moment, she had a flash of recognition. Ethan Sterling? Memories flooded back. Clara Sutton, a celebrated figure in the medical school, 2 years his senior. Back in their university days, she was known for her talent, not only excelling academically, but also playing the piano beautifully. She was the dream girl for countless male students. "What a coincidence," he smiled, gesturing to the little girl in her arms. "Is this?" "My niece Penny," Clara said, gently patting the little girl's back. "Penny, say hello." The little girl looked up, revealing a cherubic face, and shyly said, "Hello, mister." Her voice was as soft as cotton candy. Ethan's heart instantly softened. He knelt down to be at eye level with Penny. "Hello there, Penny. What kind of book are you looking for? Would you like me to help you find one?" Penny blinked her big eyes, then reached out a small hand and gently touched Ethan's cheek. "You're very handsome, like my daddy," she said in a small voice. The air froze. Clara's expression changed. She knelt down and hugged Penny a little tighter. "I'm sorry, her father. He passed away from an illness a few years ago." A pang of tightness hit Ethan's chest. He looked at this little girl who had lost her father and was suddenly reminded of Julian and Chloe. They still had Sebastian, but this child had no one. "It's okay," he said softly, reaching out to gently ruffle Penny's hair. "Penny, do you like fairy tales? I have many beautiful picture books here." Penny nodded, her eyes lighting up. For the next half hour, Ethan patiently introduced various picture books to Penny. The little girl gradually relaxed and even took Ethan's hand, asking him to read her a story. Clara stood nearby, watching them with a gentle look in her eyes. By the time Ethan got to the little prince, Penny was leaning against him, completely engrossed. "You have a very special way of telling stories," Clara said softly as she paid. "Penny is usually very shy around strangers, but she's taken to you so quickly." Ethan smiled, handing the wrapped picture book to Penny. "When I saw Penny, I felt a connection too. I wish I had a daughter just like her." He regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, but Clara just nodded thoughtfully without asking any further questions. "Can we come back often?" Penny asked as they were leaving, tugging on Ethan's sleeve and looking up with her small face. Ethan knelt down and gently pinched her little nose. "Of course, you can. You're always welcome here." Clara opened her umbrella and walked into the rain with Penny in her arms. Penny, perched on her shoulder, kept waving at the bookstore until they disappeared around the corner. Ethan stood at the door, watching their figures vanish into the rain, a long-forgotten warmth spreading through his heart. After that day, Clara and Penny became regulars at the bookstore. Nearly every weekend, they would come and spend an hour or two in the shop. Penny would always sit quietly on the small sofa in the corner, engrossed in a picture book. Clara would choose a medical textbook and sit beside her, reading quietly. Sometimes, Ethan would make them a pot of herbal tea. Clara would always thank him politely, and Penny would sweetly say, "Thank you, mister," before going back to her book. One sunny Saturday, Clara suggested taking Penny to the amusement park. "You should come with us," she said, her eyes curving into a smile, her invitation sincere. "Penny has been talking nonstop about wanting to go with you." Ethan wanted to decline, but seeing the hopeful look in Penny's eyes, his heart softened. The amusement park was bustling with people. Penny held Clara's hand with her left and Ethan's with her right, running around excitedly. They rode the carousel, played in the bumper cars, and even waited in line for the Ferris wheel. When the Ferris wheel reached its highest point, Penny suddenly pointed at a distant cloud and said, "My daddy lives up there." Ethan's heart tightened. Clara gently pulled Penny into her arms and whispered, "Daddy is watching over Penny from heaven. He wants Penny to be happy every day." Penny nodded, then turned to Ethan. "Big bro Ethan, can you be my new daddy?" The air instantly froze. Ethan didn't know how to answer. Clara quickly intervened, "Penny, don't be silly." "I'm not being silly," Penny's little face flushed. "I like big bro Ethan, and big bro Ethan likes me too, right?" Ethan looked at the little girl's stubborn expression and was suddenly reminded of Julian. He was just like that. Once he set his mind on something, he would persist stubbornly. "Of course I like Penny," he said softly, "but a daddy is one of a kind. No one can ever replace him." Penny nodded, though she didn't seem to fully understand, and leaned back into Clara's arms. On the way home, Penny fell asleep in the back seat. Clara drove, occasionally glancing at Ethan through the rearview mirror. "Thank you for spending the day with her," she said quietly. "She hasn't been this happy in a long time." Ethan shook his head. "I was happy too." Outside the car window, the setting sun stained the clouds a brilliant golden red. Ethan instinctively raised his hand to block the light, and his sleeve slipped down, revealing a scar on his wrist. Clara's gaze lingered on the scar for a second before she quickly looked away. But for the rest of the drive, her brow was slightly furrowed. A week later, Clara came to the bookstore alone, holding a thermos. "I made this calming tea myself," she said, handing the thermos to Ethan. "Maybe it will help you sleep a little better." Ethan was taken aback and asked, stunned, "How did you know I'm not sleeping well?" Although he had left that place, he could never seem to forget the past. He had lost count of the number of nights he had woken up from nightmares. Clara pushed up her glasses, her eyes behind the lenses warm and perceptive. "Have you forgotten I'm a doctor? You know, you can always come to me for help with anything. I think we can consider ourselves good friends by now, right?" Ethan instinctively pulled his sleeve down, covering his wrist. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried," Clara said quickly. "It's just, as a doctor and as a friend, I hope you'll take good care of yourself." Ethan was silent for a moment, then finally broke into a smile, his eyes curving. "I will. Thank you for the tea. And if I ever really need help, I'll be sure to ask you." "Don't worry." After that, Clara came by more often, sometimes with Penny, sometimes alone. Each time, she would bring little things: a bouquet of wildflowers, a box of homemade cookies, or a new batch of her calming tea. Ethan gradually grew accustomed to their company. Sometimes, watching Clara and Penny reading in the bookstore, he would have a fleeting thought that this was the life he had always longed for: simple, peaceful, and full of warmth. One rainy night, Ethan was organizing the bookshelves when the doorbell suddenly rang. Clara stood outside, soaked to the bone, holding a feverish Penny in her arms. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late," her voice trembled. "Penny kept crying for you. She said she can only fall asleep if you tell her a story." Ethan quickly let them in. He took the burning hot Penny, his heart aching as he looked at her flushed little face. He gently patted her back. "Mister is here, Penny. Don't be scared." That night, Ethan stayed by Penny's bedside, softly telling her stories. Clara sat nearby, watching them with a gentle gaze. When Penny finally fell asleep, the rain outside had stopped. Moonlight filtered through a gap in the curtains, casting a sliver of silver light on the floor. "Thank you," Clara whispered. Ethan shook his head. As he tried to stand up, his legs, numb from sitting for so long, gave way and he stumbled. Clara quickly caught him. As he steadied himself, he realized they were standing much too close. Both of them blushed and quietly looked away. It was a full month after Ethan Sterling had disappeared before Isabella Westwood noticed something was wrong. She had assumed Ethan was just playing some childish game of hard to get. But it wasn't until she realized she couldn't contact him no matter how she tried that she started to take it seriously. She called his old friends, but they all said they hadn't seen him. She hung up impatiently, went to her study, and pulled up Ethan's bank account information. The screen showed that the black card she had given him had a balance of 0. He had left with only his own savings and hadn't touched a single cent of the Westwood family's money. "HMPH, some backbone," she sneered, closing the laptop. He was just trying to make them come looking for him. Such a childish tactic would never work. The next morning at breakfast, Julian and Chloe were chattering about school, while Sebastian gently served them food, occasionally looking up to smile at Isabella. The scene appeared harmonious and perfect, but for some reason, Isabella felt something was missing. "Mommy, there's a parent-child sports day at school next week. Can you and Uncle Sebastian come?" Chloe asked, blinking her big eyes. "Of course," Isabella replied instinctively, then paused. "In the past, who used to go with you? Was it your dad?" Both children's faces twisted in disgust. "It was him, but we didn't want him to come," Julian pouted, his expression cold. "All he does is stay home, washing clothes and cooking. He never even wants to leave the house, and he never bothers to dress nicely. We didn't want him there at all." "Exactly," Chloe chimed in. "Uncle Sebastian always dresses so handsomely. All our classmates are so jealous of us." Sebastian smiled shyly and poured Isabella a cup of coffee. "Isabella, try this. I had the staff make it just how you like it." Isabella took a sip and couldn't help but frown slightly. It was too sweet. Ethan used to hand grind her coffee, and he never made such a mistake. He remembered she took her coffee without sugar, with just a splash of cream. "What's wrong? Not to your liking?" Sebastian asked with concern. "It's nothing." She put the cup down, saying nothing more, and simply straightened her cuffs. "I'm heading to the office." In the days that followed, life in the Westwood household seemed normal on the surface, but subtle changes were quietly taking place. Sebastian had never done housework. After a few attempts, he simply handed everything over to the household staff. Although the house still seemed to function, only Isabella and the children keenly felt that something had changed. There were no more soft, comfortably ironed clothes. The glass of milk before bed, the meticulously prepared dinners tailored to each person's taste, they were all gone. While it wasn't a major problem in their daily lives, the house seemed to have lost its familiar sense of warmth. One day, Isabella attended a business banquet and didn't return home until late at night. She staggered to the sofa and waved her assistant away. "You can go now. I'll be fine." Once the door closed, the room fell silent. Isabella wearily rubbed her temples and called out instinctively, "Is anyone here?" The words had barely left her mouth when she realized something was different about coming home tonight. The wall lamp wasn't left on for her, nor was there a steaming cup of hangover-soothing soup on the coffee table. "Mrs. Davison, didn't I say I had an event tonight? Why wasn't anything prepared?" She called the staff quarters and asked in a low, firm voice. "A moment later, Mrs. Davison hurried into the living room, flustered. "I apologize, Miss Westwood. Before, it was always Mr. Sterling who personally handled everything for you when you came home late, so we forgot to prepare. And the hangover soup you mentioned. Mr. Sterling always bought the ingredients himself and simmered it in the kitchen for hours. He never let us help. If you'd like some, I can go and see how to make it now." Isabella's heart felt like it had been struck by something. In that instant, a strange emotion began to grow. So all those things, he had prepared them all by hand. She had known he was devoted to the family, but never before had the feeling of regret been so clear. She even felt she owed him. Isabella stood in the center of the kitchen, her grim face reflected in the cold gleam of the marble countertop. Mrs. Davison stood by her side, hands folded, not daring to breathe too loudly. "So, for 6 years, he did all of this quietly and never said a word?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Mrs. Davison nodded timidly. "Mr. Sterling never let us interfere," he said. "He said you have a sensitive stomach, and the soups from outside are too harsh. He had to watch the heat himself." Isabella's fingers drummed unconsciously on the countertop. For 6 whole years, every time she came back from an event, no matter how late, there was always a warm bowl of soup on the table. She had never once considered that it was the result of Ethan staying up until the dead of night. "Miss, should I try to?" the butler asked tentatively. "No need." Isabella turned and headed for the stairs. "Everyone go get some rest." As she passed the master bedroom, she heard Sebastian's even breathing from inside. He turned over in his sleep, the silk sheets rustling softly. Isabella stood at the door, and for some reason, her thoughts drifted to Ethan. In the early days of their marriage, she couldn't stand the sight of her so-called husband by arrangement, so she would often find excuses to stay out, frequently not coming home at all. But no matter when she returned, she would always find him in the living room, quietly waiting for her. Ethan was a light sleeper. The slightest noise would wake him. Sometimes she'd come home in the middle of the night to find him curled up asleep on the sofa, the TV still on with the volume at its lowest setting. Back then, she didn't like him at all. Even seeing him like that, she wouldn't spare him a second glance and would just go to her room. But he had done this for years. It wasn't until much later that she finally started to pause for him, even covering him with a blanket. When did all of that change? It seemed to be after Sebastian returned. Because she was often busy handling various matters for Sebastian, her trips home became less and less frequent. One time, Sebastian mentioned wanting to see the children, so she brought them along. It seemed to be from that point on that their contact with Sebastian increased, and they would often spend most of their time with him. Ethan had questioned her about it. He had said angrily, "You are my wife, and Julian and Chloe are my children. Why do you spend every day fussing over someone else?" He paused, as if struggling to get the words out, his eyes turning red. "When you're like this, I can't even tell who you consider your husband and who you consider their father." But at the time, her mind was solely focused on the newly returned Sebastian. His questions only made her feel he was being unreasonable. She had replied coldly, "Have you forgotten? If you hadn't interfered?" Sebastian would have been the master of this house to begin with. Ethan had frozen, the look in his eyes filled with an indescribable disappointment. Back then, seeing the pained disbelief in his eyes, she had felt a flicker of emotion. But Sebastian was the man she truly loved. So she ignored the stunned Ethan and turned away without hesitation. After that, Ethan never brought it up again, as if the conversation had never happened. She had been satisfied, thinking he had finally learned his place. With that thought, she found herself pushing open the door to the children's room. Julian and Chloe were sound asleep, their little heads resting together. On the bedside table was a framed photo of them with Sebastian, their smiles bright. Ethan's picture had been taken down at some point. Staring at the empty spot where Ethan's photo used to hang, she felt an inexplicable emptiness in her heart. She didn't return to the master bedroom, but went to the guest room alone. Outside, the moonlight cast a cold glow into the room. Isabella took a bottle of whiskey from the liquor cabinet and drank straight from it. The fiery liquid burned her throat, but couldn't extinguish the strange restlessness in her heart. After that day, Isabella began to travel frequently for business, and she was rarely home. With her often away, Sebastian was more than happy to have his freedom, spending his days either at the gym or at the salon. With no one to take them to and from school, and with Sebastian often secretly excusing them from class to take them out to play and win their favor. Julian and Chloe started following his example. They began skipping school altogether, spending their days hiding out. When Sebastian found out, he didn't care in the slightest. "Sir, the young master and young miss have been skipping school frequently. The teacher has already called the house, hoping you and the mistress can be more involved. Master Julian and Miss Chloe don't listen to us staff members. Do you think you could come home and talk to them? At least get them to go to school." "All right, I'll handle it." Sebastian lounged on the sofa, admiring his freshly styled hair. "There's no need to tell Isabella about this. She's busy enough with work. I don't want to bother her." He hung up, and a friend sitting nearby teased him. "No way, are you really going to bother with those two dead weights? I mean, marrying a rich woman is great, but having these two kids left over must be annoying." "Who said I was going to bother?" Sebastian yawned lazily, his eyes gleaming with cunning. "I hope they grow up useless. That way, they won't compete with my future children for the inheritance." With that, he dialed the number for Julian and Chloe's homeroom teacher. "Hello, teacher. Our children have some family matters to attend to recently. You don't need to worry about them not coming to school. You know our family situation. They don't need to be too focused on school. Also, their mother is very busy lately. If there's anything, please contact me directly. Don't bother her with it." After hanging up, he finally felt at ease and quickly put the matter out of his mind. That evening, after his workout, he made a rare appearance back at the house. The living room was a mess from the two children's playing. When they saw him, they ran over happily. "Uncle Sebastian, you're finally back, we missed you," but to their surprise, Sebastian, who was usually all smiles with them, looked extremely cold. He brushed them off impatiently. "I know, I have things to do. You two go play by yourselves." Julian, thinking Sebastian was still the same doting uncle, angrily threw a toy on the floor. "No, uncle, you have to play with us," but at his words, Sebastian's expression suddenly turned terrifying. His eyes, once so gentle, held no trace of a smile. "What did you say? Who do you think you're shouting at? Don't you know I'm about to marry your mother and become the new master of this house? Your mother never liked your worthless father, and soon enough, she'll start to hate you too as well." The two children clung to each other in fear, not daring to breathe, all the arrogance they had shown when bullying Ethan gone. "Good, as long as you understand. Remember, from now on, you will listen to me in this house. If you ever raise your voice at me again, don't blame me for what happens." With a final warning glance at the two children, he coldly turned and went upstairs. From that day on, under Sebastian's influence, the household staff gradually began to disregard the two children. Not only did no one take them to school, but soon, even their 3 daily meals were no longer specially prepared for them. They could only eat the scraps left over after Sebastian had finished his meals. The summer sun baked the city, and the air conditioner in the Westwood villa hummed. Julian and Chloe were on the playroom floor, building with Legos, occasionally stealing glances at Sebastian, who was adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. "Uncle Sebastian," Chloe began timidly, "can we go get ice cream? You promised." Last week, their mother had bought Uncle Sebastian a new watch. In his good mood, he had nudged the two children on the floor with his foot and said he would take them for ice cream later. But Sebastian didn't even turn around, snapping impatiently, "Can't you see I'm busy?" "But," Julian summoned his courage and spoke softly, "you said last week you would take us." "Are you ever not annoying?" Sebastian spun around, the tie crumpled in his hand. "All you ever think about is eating. Look at how scrawny you've become." The two children shrank back in fear. Ever since their father left, they had felt none of Uncle Sebastian's care. His once kind and gentle smiles were gone, replaced by constant impatient frowns and sharp rebukes. "Get back to your room." Sebastian pulled out a tissue to wipe his fingers, scowling. "The sight of you annoys me." Tears welled up in Chloe's eyes, but she didn't dare to cry out. The last time she cried, Uncle Sebastian had pinched her thigh and threatened that if she told her mother, he would throw away all her favorite toys. One day, Isabella gave a rare notice that she would be home for the night. When she arrived, the children were already asleep. Sebastian, dressed in a robe, greeted her, a faint scent of aftershave clinging to him, his meticulously cared for skin looking exceptionally smooth. "Finally done with work. Decided to grace us with your presence," he said softly, taking her briefcase. "There was an issue with the merger. I should be home more often now, Isabella replied, taking off her coat. She looked around and suddenly asked, "Where are the kids? I haven't seen them in ages." "They went to bed early. Don't worry, I've been taking good care of them," Sebastian said, wrapping an arm around her waist. He added casually, "Isabella, there's a charity gala tomorrow, and I'm missing a matching watch. Could you?" Isabella, not fully listening, nodded distractedly. "Go pick one out yourself. Just use my black card." The next morning at breakfast, she finally saw the two children come down to eat. However, to Isabella's confusion, Julian and Chloe were unusually silent. Looking closely, she noticed the children seemed to have lost some weight. Their chins had become sharper. Isabella put down her coffee cup and frowned. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" And no, Julian immediately shook his head in a panic, his hands trembling so much that his spoon clattered against the bowl. Sebastian emerged from the kitchen with a fruit platter. He glanced over and smiled lightly. "Isabella, don't worry, the kids are fine." He bent down and affectionately ruffled Julian's hair, his voice exceptionally gentle. "Right, Julian?" Julian stiffened and mumbled, "Yes." Isabella's phone rang. She checked the caller ID and stood up. "Something's come up at the office. I have to go." The moment the door closed, Sebastian's smile vanished. He snatched the milk glass from Chloe's hand, his face etched with impatience. "Drinking so slowly, do you want to be late? Hurry up and eat. While your mother is back for these few days, you'd better behave and go to school. Don't cause any trouble. Otherwise, don't blame me for being harsh." The threat was highly effective. Chloe flinched and quickly stuffed bread into her mouth, only to choke on it, her face turning red. "Useless thing," Sebastian frowned in disgust, not sparing her a second glance. Pathetic, just like your father in her office, as Isabella was handling business matters, her phone vibrated. It was the butler. "Ma'am, the young master has a fever, 103.1. We're worried something might happen." Isabella's brow furrowed. "Have you called a doctor?" "We did, but Mr. Hawthorne said not to worry. He went out to a party." "What?" Isabella's expression changed instantly, her voice tinged with surprise. "I'm on my way back. Have the family doctor come over immediately." When she rushed home through the rain, she found Julian flushed red with fever, his small body trembling uncontrollably. The family doctor was administering an IV, his face grim. "Why is it so severe?" "Miss Westwood, the child has had a high fever for 4 hours. Any later and it could have developed into pneumonia," the doctor said in a low, serious tone. "The child's constitution is already weak. He should have been treated sooner." A tightness gripped Isabella's chest. She remembered. When Ethan was around, he would notice the moment the children felt even slightly unwell. Often, he didn't even need a thermometer to accurately gauge their fever. "Where is Sebastian? Why haven't I seen him?" The butler hesitated before finally saying, "Mr. Hawthorne said it was just a small cold. He went to Mr. Wang's birthday party and felt it would be rude to cancel." Isabella took out her phone and dialed Sebastian's number. It rang for a long time before he answered, the background filled with the clamor of laughter and music. "Isabella?" Sebastian's voice was tinged with a tipsy cheerfulness, as if he hadn't given the matter a second thought. "Julian's fever is almost 104. Where are you?" "Ah, I'll be right back." It was the first time Isabella had spoken to him so sharply, and Sebastian's tone immediately turned flustered and aggrieved. "I'm so sorry, Isabella. I thought it was just a common cold. I'm on my way back now." An hour later, Sebastian rushed back, still dressed in his party suit, his face perfectly made up. He approached Isabella with red-rimmed eyes, his face etched with guilt. "Isabella, I honestly didn't know Julian was this sick." Isabella looked at his flawless makeup and the lingering smell of alcohol on him, a wave of irritation washing over her. But faced with the man she had once yearned for, she softened. "Let it go this time. Just be more careful in the future." Late at night, Julian's fever finally began to subside. Isabella's phone rang again. It was an urgent call from her assistant. "Miss Westwood, an urgent situation has come up at the office. We need you to handle it immediately." Isabella glanced at her sleeping son on the hospital bed and hesitated for a moment. "Sebastian, can you watch him for a bit? I'll be back as soon as I'm done." Sebastian nodded obediently, his expression unchanged. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of Julian." Isabella left in a hurry, but when she reached the hospital entrance and checked her pockets, she realized she had left her car keys in the room. As she walked back, just outside the door, she heard Sebastian's low voice from within. "You little brat, stop pretending you made me miss the rest of the party." Julian's tearful voice came faintly in response. "I'm sorry, Uncle Sebastian. I didn't mean to. I'm warning you, don't you dare play the victim in front of your mother." Sebastian's voice was terrifyingly cold, devoid of any sympathy. "If you say the wrong thing, you'll see what I do to you. I won't tell." Julian sobbed. "I'll be good. Please don't hit me." "HMPH, you'd better be." Just as pathetic as your worthless father, listening from outside the door, Isabella was thunderstruck. The image of the kind man she had once loved shattered completely in an instant. The door was kicked open with a loud bang. Sebastian spun around in terror, meeting Isabella's furious gaze. Isabella?" His face turned deathly pale and he stammered, "Let me explain. I was just." But Isabella had already strode forward and slapped him hard across the face. Sebastian stumbled back against the wall, his perfectly styled hair falling into disarray. "I had no idea this is how you played the part of the good father behind my back. Today you hit him and threaten him. Tomorrow, will you try to walk all over me? Get out." Isabella's voice was as cold as ice. "Today, you will take all of your things and move out of my house. Don't let me see you again." Sebastian scrambled up from the floor, pleading desperately, "Isabella, I was just worried. I truly love these children. I'll be good to them from now on." "Love?" Isabella sneered. "Is hitting and threatening them your idea of love?" She turned to Julian on the bed. The boy had shrunk into a ball, his small face covered in tears. Isabella's heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. How blind had she been to not see the fear her children were living in? "Mommy," Julian timidly reached out, his eyes full of terror. "I was wrong. I'll listen to Uncle. Please don't throw me away." Isabella knelt by the bed, tightly gripping her son's feverish hand. "No, Mommy was wrong." She turned to look at Sebastian, the disappointment and disgust in her eyes making him take an involuntary step back. "I never thought you were this kind of person." Sebastian tried to argue, but Isabella had already pressed the call button. "Security, please have this gentleman leave immediately." As Sebastian's shouts finally faded down the hallway, Isabella sat wearily by the bedside. Julian carefully tugged at her sleeve, sobbing pitifully. "Mommy, I miss Daddy. Will you bring Daddy back?" A lump formed in Isabella's throat. She thought of Ethan's resolute back as he left, and of her own coldness and cruelty towards him. A dull ache spread through her chest. "Mommy," Chloe, who had woken up at some point, came over rubbing her eyes. "I miss Daddy too. When is Daddy coming back?" Isabella pulled both children into her arms, unsure of how to comfort them, a bitter taste filling her heart. 2 days later, Julian was finally discharged from the hospital. In the living room of the Westwood mansion, piles of Sebastian's belongings were stacked up. Sebastian himself stood there, his meticulously manicured nails digging into Isabella's sleeve. "Isabella, you can't do this to me." His voice was tearful, his eyes filled with endless regret. "We've known each other for 20 years. Are you really going to do this over such a small thing?" "A small thing?" Isabella yanked her arm away, her eyes as cold as ice. "Abusing my children is a small thing?" She took out her phone and played a surveillance video. On the screen, Sebastian was viciously pinching Chloe's thigh. The little girl was crying from the pain but didn't dare make a sound. And this. She swiped to another video, showing Sebastian pouring sleeping pills into the children's milk. "I can't believe that just so you could go to a party, you would actually drug my children to make them sleep." Sebastian's face turned deathly pale. You were spying on me? You haven't trusted me for a while, have you?" "I was monitoring my home." Isabella's voice was magnetic and dangerous. Just then, a maid suddenly rushed out, her voice trembling. "Miss, I have something to say." She pointed a shaky finger at Sebastian, her eyes filled with undisguised disgust. From the very first time he came to this house, he has been trying to drive a wedge between Mr. Sterling and the children. "You're lying," Sebastian shrieked. "I'm not," the maid said, summoning her courage. "He would always buy the children snacks and toys when Mr. Sterling wasn't around, and he taught them to say bad things about their father. I personally heard him tell the young master, 'Your father doesn't let you have candy because he doesn't love you.'" He also said that only if the young master and young miss found a way to drive their father away could they all truly be together. That's why the very next day, the young master personally pushed Mr. Sterling down the stairs. Isabella's expression grew darker and darker. She turned to the butler and said sternly, "Pull up the surveillance footage from that day." When the video played on the large screen, the entire living room fell silent. On the screen, the two children, their faces twisted in malicious glee, pushed Ethan down the stairs. And afterward, Sebastian, who had entered with Isabella, couldn't hide the triumphant smile on his face. "Mommy!" Chloe suddenly rushed down the stairs and threw herself into Isabella's arms, her voice choked with tears. "We were wrong. We want Daddy back." Julian followed behind her, his small face streaked with tears. "Uncle Sebastian said Daddy doesn't want us anymore. Is that true?" Sebastian sneered. "Of course it's true. He's already abandoned you. And right now, he's probably with some other woman." "Isabella, you still don't know, do you? What you signed that day wasn't some property agreement. It was the divorce papers that Ethan gave you himself. You two have no relationship anymore. You were the one who drove him away." Slap, another loud slap cut off his vicious words. Isabella's hand was still in the air, her eyes burning with a rage she had never shown before. "Throw all of his things out," she ordered the butler, "and I don't want him taking a single thing I bought for him." Sebastian clutched his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Isabella, are you crazy? For that old man?" "Shut up," Isabella snapped, her face like ice. "Say one more word, and I'll make sure you can never work in this city again." The servants moved quickly, tossing Sebastian's suitcases out the front door one by one. His limited edition figurines, designer clothes, and luxury watches scattered across the ground like a pile of garbage. "You'll regret this," Sebastian screamed hysterically from the doorway. "You think Ethan Sterling will take you back? He's had enough of you." The heavy door slammed shut in his face, cutting off his vile curses. The living room was suddenly terrifyingly quiet. Isabella slowly knelt down, pulling her two children into her arms. Their small bodies were trembling, and their tears fell, soaking her suit. "Mommy, does Daddy really not want us anymore?" Chloe asked between sobs. A lump formed in Isabella's throat. She thought of Ethan's resolute back as he walked away, and of the divorce papers she had signed with her own hand. A dull ache spread through her chest. "No, he doesn't," she said softly, though it felt more like she was trying to convince herself, her brow deeply furrowed. "Daddy loves you so much. He would never be able to leave you. He probably just went away to clear his head." "Then why isn't he back?" Julian looked up, his eyes clouded with tears. "Is it because we pushed him down the stairs?" Isabella couldn't manage a smile and could only wipe away his tears. "Mommy will find Daddy." Once the servants had taken the children upstairs, Isabella allowed herself to collapse onto the sofa. She took out her phone and dialed her assistant's number. "Find Ethan Sterling's whereabouts. Immediately," she said in a low voice. After hanging up, Isabella's gaze fell on the family portrait above the fireplace. It had been taken 3 years ago. Ethan was standing at the very edge, his smile so forced. But at the time, she hadn't had eyes for Ethan. She hadn't even noticed his expression. Looking back now, perhaps it was her constant neglect that made him give up on them completely. "Ma'am," the butler's quiet voice broke her train of thought. "Dinner is ready. Shall I call the young master and young miss down?" Isabella nodded, her brow still deeply furrowed. "I'll eat with them tonight." In the dining room, Julian and Chloe ate listlessly, their usual chatter gone. The two children, who had once been so chubby and round, were now so thin their chins were sharp. "Mommy," Chloe asked in a small voice, all her past willfulness and arrogance gone. "I miss Daddy. Where did he go? Why has he been gone for so long? When you find Daddy, will he forgive us?" Isabella's hand paused. She finally nodded, her voice firm. "No matter what, he is your father. He used to love you more than anything. He will definitely forgive you." Late at night, Isabella stood alone in the study, reviewing the surveillance footage from the past 6 months. The Ethan on the screen was always quietly doing housework, taking care of the children, waiting for her to come home. He rarely smiled, but whenever the children needed him, he was always the first to appear. Until that day. The two children pushed him down the stairs, and she didn't even look back at him. Isabella turned off the video, a heavy feeling in her chest. When she found Ethan, she would definitely treat him right. Isabella stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in her study, her knuckles tapping against the mahogany desk. Photos, just delivered by her assistant, were scattered across the table, each one a sharp jab to her eyes. "Are you sure it's him?" Her voice was dangerously low. "Absolutely certain," the assistant said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mr. Sterling opened a bookstore in Havenwood. These photos were taken last week." The man in the photo, Ethan Sterling, stood in front of a bookstore named Sterling Books. Sunlight filtered through the plane trees, casting dappled light on him. He wore a simple linen shirt, his hair a little shorter than when he left, and he was bent over, speaking to a little girl of 5 or 6. The expression on his face was a softness she hadn't seen in a long time, but the most glaring detail was the woman standing next to him. She was petite, her gentle gaze fixed on Ethan. With the man holding the little girl, the three of them together created a picture of harmony that was suffocating to look at. Who is the woman standing next to him? Isabella's thumb pressed down hard on the photo, smudging the woman's face. That appears to be his senior from university, a woman named Clara Sutton. The little girl with her is her late sister's child. They were only acquaintances in university and met again by chance in Havenwood. However, Mr. Sterling seems to be very fond of the little girl. He often spends time with her, and Clara Sutton is usually with them. "That's enough." Isabella raised a hand to cut him off, a strange, sour feeling churning in her chest. How dare Ethan look at another woman with that expression? That was a tenderness that belonged only to her. Just then, the study door was pushed open. Chloe and Julian ran in barefoot, their faces streaked with tears. "Mommy," Chloe threw herself against her leg. "Mrs. Davison said you found Daddy, is it true?" Isabella bent down and picked up her daughter, her eyes sweeping over the photo of Ethan's smiling face. It had been 3 months. He hadn't contacted his own children once, yet he could smile so happily at someone else's child in another city. "Can we go find Daddy?" Julian tugged at her dress. "We miss him." Isabella looked at the happy trio in the photo and suddenly let out a cold laugh. "Get the plane ready," she told her assistant, her fingers gently wiping the tears from Chloe's face. "We're going to bring Daddy home." She refused to believe that Ethan could genuinely like that woman. This had to be a ploy to make her angry. After all, he had once loved her so much, loved her enough to endure 6 years of neglect. As long as she went to him in person, with their 2 children, his heart was sure to soften. Meanwhile, in Havenwood's Earthen Arts pottery studio, Ethan was focused on shaping a lump of clay. Little Penny was perched on the workbench beside him, her small face smudged with several streaks of clay. "Big bro Ethan, look at the little rabbit I made." The little girl proudly held up a lopsided creation. Ethan leaned in for a closer look, then reached out and dabbed a bit of clay on the tip of Penny's nose. "It really is a little rabbit. Shouldn't a little rabbit have a round nose?" Penny giggled and grabbed a handful of clay to retaliate. As the 2 of them played, Clara walked over with 3 cups of hot tea, her own face now dotted with a speck of flying clay. "You too," she said, shaking her head in amusement, though she couldn't hide the smile on her lips. "Are you treating this place like a battlefield?" Sunlight streamed through the skylight onto the table. Clara took out a handkerchief and naturally began to wipe the clay from Ethan's cheek. Her fingers paused as they touched his skin. Realizing their proximity, the tips of her ears turned a faint pink. Penny watched them with a grin, then suddenly put down her clay and looked at Ethan with wide, blinking eyes. "Big bro Ethan, I'm so happy. I wish I could stay with you and Auntie forever." Ethan's heart stirred. He looked up and met Clara's gentle gaze. Her eyes held a hint of cautious hope, sending a tremor through him. But then, the thought of Isabella and those 2 children. His expression dimmed, and he didn't reply. "Penny," Clara suddenly broke the silence, pushing a small, finished bowl in front of her niece. "Look at this. Do you like it?" Penny's attention was successfully diverted, and she forgot her earlier question. Ethan looked down, his fingers unconsciously stroking the rough surface of the clay. A warmth spread through his chest, mingled with an indescribable bitterness. In the restroom, Ethan stared at his reflection in the mirror. 3 months had passed. The dark circles under his eyes had faded, the tense line of his mouth had relaxed, and the scars on his body had lightened. The sun and breeze of Havenwood seemed to have truly healed some of his invisible wounds. But when Penny had said, "Stay together forever," The faces that had flashed before his eyes were Julian's and Chloe's, the two children he had once devoted all his energy to raising, only to be pushed down the stairs by them. Could he truly forget all of that? Isabella's private jet landed at the Havenwood Airport that same day. The sunlight was searingly bright. She squinted as she watched the two children being carried down by the bodyguards. "Mommy, are we really going to see Daddy?" Chloe asked, her small face tilted up, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and anxiety. "Of course." Isabella straightened her dress, her voice steady and confident. "Daddy will be very happy to see you." Her assistant hurried over, handing her a file. "Miss Westwood, we've confirmed his location. He's at a pottery studio on the east side of the city with those two." The file contained a candid photo. Ethan was kneeling in front of a little girl, gently wiping a smudge of clay from her face. Standing beside him was a tall woman, watching them with a smile. Sunlight streamed through a glass window, bathing the three of them in a warm glow. The scene was painfully picturesque. Isabella's fingers tightened unconsciously, wrinkling the edge of the photo. The way that woman looked at Ethan, it was a look she knew all too well. It was a tenderness she had never given him. "Get the car," she said coldly. "We're going now." On the way, Julian and Chloe were unusually quiet. They pressed their faces against the car window, watching the unfamiliar city pass by, their small hands nervously clutching their clothes. Isabella noticed that both children had deliberately worn the outfits Ethan had bought for them last year. They were a little too small now. "Mommy," Julian suddenly asked in a small voice, his young face etched with anxiety, "do you think Daddy will forgive us?" Isabella didn't answer right away. She thought of the surveillance footage of Ethan's pained expression as he was pushed down the stairs and of his resolute back as he walked away. "He will," she finally said, though she wasn't sure if she was lying to them or to herself. "Daddy loves you more than anything. How could he abandon you?" The car stopped in front of a pottery studio called Earthen Arts. Through the large glass window, Isabella saw him at once. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt and jeans, concentrating on a piece of clay. The sunlight cast a golden halo on his profile, making him look soft and bright. The little girl named Penny suddenly grabbed a handful of clay and playfully smeared it on Ethan's face. To Isabella's surprise, not only did Ethan not get angry, he laughed and tried to smear some back on her. He was laughing so freely, so genuinely, a laugh Isabella hadn't seen in a very long time. Daddy, Chloe, who had been watching beside her, suddenly broke free from the bodyguard's grasp and ran towards the studio. Isabella didn't have time to stop her and could only hurry after them. The moment she pushed the door open, a wind chime tinkled. Ethan looked up at the sound and the smile froze on his face. "Chloe?" His voice trembled slightly. His gaze moved past the child to land on Isabella. But the expression on his face wasn't happiness. It was resistance and coldness. What are you doing here? How did you find me?" Penny looked curiously at the strangers who had just burst in and instinctively hid behind Ethan. Clara stood up, subtly positioning herself in front of them. "Daddy," Julian ran in too, throwing his arms around Ethan's legs, his eyes welling with tears. "We missed you so much, Daddy. Have you been with these two people all this time? Was it for them?" He glared at Penny with open hostility, his stare so intense that it made the little girl clutch Ethan's pant leg tightly. Ethan stood frozen, his hands hovering in mid-air, unsure whether to hug them back. But after seeing the look in Julian's eyes, he suddenly came to his senses and his expression turned cold. He made no move to embrace them. Instead, he took a small step back. His gaze shifted between his two children and Clara, finally settling on Isabella. "What are you doing here?" His voice was soft but cut like a knife. Isabella took a step forward, her gaze sweeping over Clara before locking onto Ethan's face. "Ethan, we're here to take you home. Stop this nonsense. Your punishment has gone on long enough and the children know they were wrong. Just come home with us." The pottery studio fell silent. The other customers and staff paused their work, watching the scene with curiosity. "Home?" Ethan let out a cold laugh. "Which home is that?" "Daddy, please come back with us," Chloe begged, shaking his hand, her eyes devoid of their former petulance and filled instead with pleading. "We'll never make you angry again." "Yeah, Daddy," Julian added quickly. "We kicked Uncle Sebastian out. Mommy said you'll be our only daddy from now on." Ethan's expression flickered. He knelt to face his children. I'm not going back with you. Because not everything can be fixed with an apology. Why not? Tears streamed from Chloe's eyes. Doesn't Daddy love us anymore? The question was a blunt knife twisting in Ethan's heart. He opened his mouth, a bitter smile on his face. Pushing me down the stairs, framing me for the mango incident. Didn't you do those things with your own hands? Saying you didn't want me as a father, that you only wanted Sebastian as your dad. Didn't those words come from your own mouths? I always thought that while I may not have been a perfect father, I did everything I could to take care of you, to love you. I just don't understand why this was the result. The children flushed with shame, unable to speak. But Julian, unwilling to give up, pleaded again. Daddy, we were just kids. We know we were wrong now. Please, can you forgive us? Before Ethan could answer, Penny spoke up timidly. Big bro Ethan. Her small hand clutched his sleeve, her beautiful eyes filled with tears. Are you going to leave? Clara bent down and picked up her niece, comforting her softly. Penny, don't be scared. Big bro Ethan won't leave you. No matter where he chooses to go, we must respect his decision. Besides, even if he isn't here, he'll still come visit you often. Watching this scene, a nameless anger flared in Isabella's chest. Who was this strange woman to use such an intimate title? Who was she to stand beside Ethan, holding a child as if they were the real family? Ethan Sterling, she stepped forward, her voice low, stop being willful. The children need you. As their father, are you going to abandon your own flesh and blood to raise someone else's child? Willful, they need me. Ethan stood up, his eyes glinting with a cold light Isabella had never seen. When they pushed me down the stairs, did they need me then? When they told everyone they hated me, did they need me then? When they called Sebastian daddy, did they need me then? Each question was like a slap, rendering Isabella speechless. The two children cried even harder, clinging to Ethan's clothes and refusing to let go. We were wrong, Daddy, Chloe sobbed, gasping for air. We'll only love you from now on. We'll never hurt you again. Ethan's eyes reddened, but his stance remained firm. Clara quietly handed him a tissue. This small gesture completely enraged Isabella. Who do you think you are? She demanded coldly. What right do you have to interfere in our family matters? Clara calmly pushed up her glasses, her voice steady. I am Ethan's friend. As for rights, she glanced at the two crying children. I don't think the people who hurt him have any right to ask me that question. Isabella's fists clenched so tightly they cracked. Just as the tension reached its peak, Penny whispered, Big bro Ethan, we haven't finished our bowls yet. Her words seemed to solidify Ethan's resolve. He took a deep breath and turned to Isabella. Please take the children and leave. I'll say it one more time, there is nothing left for us to talk about. Daddy, the two children shrieked in unison, clinging to his legs. Please, don't leave us, the scene descended into chaos. The studio owner hesitated, wondering if he should call the police, while other customers pulled out their phones to record. Ethan stood at the center of the storm, his face pale. Isabella looked at his trembling hands and suddenly realized she had made a fatal mistake. She had thought bringing the children would move him, but she had forgotten to consider his feelings. The wounds he carried couldn't be erased with a simple apology, like a shattered vase that, no matter how well repaired, will always show its cracks. Julian, Chloe, she said with difficulty. Let's go home for now. No, Julian screamed defiantly, clutching Ethan's shirt. We want Daddy. You said you would bring Daddy home with us today, you promised. Ethan closed his eyes, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. Clara quietly placed Penny's small hand in his. The little girl immediately squeezed his fingers, as if to give him strength. Isabella, Ethan said, his voice now as cold as ice, with no trace of hesitation. Take them away. I've already told you, I cannot forgive what you all did in the past. If you're here to discuss child support, I will wire the money without hesitation. As for anything else, don't bring it up again. If you come back, I won't hesitate to call the police. The words struck Isabella like a sledgehammer, shattering her confidence. She had been so sure that Ethan would soften, that he would come back for the children's sake. She had never imagined his resolve to leave would be so absolute. She bent down and forcibly picked up the two children, ignoring their cries and struggles as she strode towards the door. Before leaving, she glanced back one last time. Ethan was kneeling on the floor, comforting Penny, with Clara standing beside them. The three of them looked so close, so happy. Inside the pottery studio, a sense of calm had returned. Ethan worked the clay in his hands mechanically, his knuckles white from the force. Penny sat quietly beside him, casting worried glances his way from time to time. "Big bro Ethan?" The little girl finally broke the silence, her bright eyes filled with concern. "Are you sad? You don't look happy." Ethan's hands paused, he forced a smile. "No, Penny, don't worry about me. Go on and finish your little bowl." Clara silently brought over a cup of warm water and placed it beside him. "Do you want to take a break?" He shook his head, his gaze falling on the half-finished bowl in front of him. It was lopsided and misshapen, just like his feelings at that moment. The images of Julian's and Chloe's tear-streaked faces kept flashing in his mind, making his chest feel heavy. They looked thinner," he said softly, as if talking to himself. Clara didn't reply, simply sitting quietly by his side. Sunlight streamed through the window onto the workbench, and the small bowl Penny was making glowed softly in the light. "Auntie," little Penny said thoughtfully, suddenly proposing, "let's make a present for big bro Ethan." Clara gently ruffled her niece's hair and said softly, "Okay, what do you want to make, Penny?" "Let's make a little house," Penny said excitedly. "That way, big bro Ethan will have a new home." The innocent words made Ethan's nose sting. He looked at the little girl seriously shaping her clay, and at Clara, who was guiding her with concentration. He suddenly realized that, without him even noticing, these two had become an important part of his life. "Penny," he asked softly, "why do you want to make a house for me?" The little girl looked up, her large eyes clear as day. "Because big bro Ethan is sad. Auntie says a home should be a happy place. I want to make him happy again." Ethan's eyes reddened once more. Clara looked down, slightly embarrassed, the tips of her ears turning pink. Out of the mouths of babes. "Ethan, please don't be sad." "Thank you," Ethan said suddenly, his voice a little choked up. But then he broke into a tearful smile. "Meeting you both, I'm very happy." Penny immediately threw her arms around him, her small hands clinging to his neck. "Then can we be together forever, big bro Ethan?" Like a family, Clara's hand froze in mid-air, the clay slipping through her fingers. Her gaze met Ethan's, and they both blushed. "Penny," she gently scolded, "you'll put pressure on him by saying that." "It's okay." Ethan smiled gently, stroking the little girl's hair. He looked at Clara, his gaze soft but firm. "I would be honored to be a part of your lives." Two pairs of eyes in front of him lit up like brilliant stars. Ethan looked at the woman and child before him and couldn't help but smile, the ache in his chest gradually replaced by a new emotion. It was a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a very long time. The recent rains in Havenwood had been frequent, and even business at Sterling Books had slowed down. But for many days now, a Maybach had been parked outside. The owner waited patiently at the entrance, never leaving. "Big bro Ethan, look at my drawing." Penny came running over, holding up a crayon drawing, but stopped short when she saw his expression. "Big bro Ethan," she asked cautiously, "are you sad again?" Ethan forced a smile and instead of answering, took the drawing. "This is wonderful. Is it a little rabbit?" "MHM," Penny nodded vigorously, then turned and pointed out the window. "Is it because those bad people are back that you're sad?" Clara emerged from behind a bookshelf, carrying a steaming cup of herbal tea. She subtly stood in front of the window, blocking the view of the street. "Should we call the police?" she asked softly, her gaze flicking to the luxury car that had been parked there for a week. Through the rain, two small figures could be faintly seen pressed against the car window, staring longingly at the bookstore. Ethan shook his head coolly. "They'll give up eventually." The rain began to fall harder. Suddenly, the car door across the street flew open. Chloe, holding a black umbrella far too large for her, stumbled towards the bookstore. The rain soaked the hem of her dress and her little leather shoes, but she paid it no mind, relentlessly pounding on the locked door. "Daddy, please open the door," her childish voice, laced with tears, pierced the rain. "I know you're in there, Daddy, you saw us. Why are you ignoring me and my brother? Do you really not want us anymore?" Ethan's fingers gripped the curtain so tightly his knuckles turned white. Clara silently stood beside him, her warm hand gently covering his trembling one. "This is the last time," Ethan said suddenly, his gaze hardening with resolve. "This time I will settle things with them for good." With that, he took out his phone, found the number that had long been blocked, and sent a message. At the cafe, Ethan chose a table by the window and quietly waited for them. Before long, Isabella arrived with the two children. She was uncharacteristically not in a business suit. A simple white shirt clung to her, wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. The two children were also in dirty clothes, looking much thinner and utterly miserable. "Daddy," Chloe rushed towards him, but he gently sidestepped her just as she was about to reach him. "Sit," Ethan said, gesturing to the chair opposite him, his voice unnervingly calm. Isabella flinched. "Ethan," she began with difficulty, "the children haven't been doing well. Their health was already fragile, and without you to look after them." "I know," he cut her off, pulling a manila envelope from his bag. "This is the growth journal I kept for them, from birth until now. Everything you need to know about taking care of them is in here. Allergy lists, medication records, they're not little anymore. I'm sure you can take good care of them." The color drained from Isabella's face. "What do you mean by this?" she stammered. "I don't want this. Ethan, don't you understand? We just want you back." Ethan didn't look at her. He lowered his head with a sardonic smile and slowly rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a hideous scar. "Remember this, from the broken glass when Julian pushed me down the stairs." His tone was flat. "I got 12 stitches that night, and at that moment you three were at home with Sebastian, a perfect, happy family." Julian's face went white. He stared at the scar in horror, his lips trembling. "Daddy, I didn't mean to." Ethan shook his head gently, then lifted his pant leg to reveal the terrifying scar on his leg. A massive, centipede-like scar ran across his leg, looking as if a chunk of flesh had been gouged out. "This one is from when Sebastian and I were trapped in the elevator, and you said he still needed to play the piano, so you gave up on me without a second thought." His voice was soft but sharp as a razor. "I was this close to losing my leg. Every single one of you says you didn't mean to." Ethan's gaze shifted to Isabella, filled with undisguised irony. "Just like you didn't mean to frame me for the mangoes, or deliberately tell everyone you hated me. What about me? All the pain I've endured, should it all be dismissed just because of your careless, I didn't mean to?" Chloe burst into tears, rushing forward to grab his arm. "But we know we were wrong now, Daddy. Please come back, we'll never do it again." Ethan looked at his crying daughter, his heart surprisingly calm, the familiar twisting pain gone. He simply sat there, waiting for the sobs to quiet down. "I once," he began slowly, each word feeling like it was being squeezed from his chest, "I once loved you all so much. Chloe, when you were born premature, you were only 4 pounds, 8 ounces. I stayed by your incubator for 7 days and nights. Julian, when you were bullied and afraid to go to school, I walked you to your classroom door every day. I remembered every single one of your birthdays, baked your cakes by hand. But love can be exhausted. When you pushed me down the stairs, told me you never wanted to see me again, and chose Sebastian as your father, whatever we had between us ended then. I came here today to tell you this." Ethan stood up, placing money for the coffee under his cup. He spoke each word clearly. "I am not coming back. This isn't to punish you. It's because I have a new life now, and I have no desire to be dragged back into the past, into this pointless entanglement with you." He turned and walked away without hesitation. Chloe's heart-wrenching cries echoed behind him, but his steps never faltered. "Daddy, please don't leave us." Ethan pushed open the cafe door. Across the street, Clara was waiting by the car, holding Penny's hand. The moment the little girl saw him, she let go of her aunt's hand and ran to him. "Big bro Ethan," Penny threw herself into his arms, her small hands anxiously touching his face. "Are you okay? Did they bully you?" Ethan bent down and lifted the little girl into his arms, kissing her soft cheek. "I'm fine. Let's go home." Clara walked over. She didn't ask any questions, just gently took his arm. The three of them walked towards the car, their figures looking so harmonious in the sunlight. Inside the cafe, Chloe's sobs gradually subsided. Isabella stared blankly out the window, watching Ethan get into the unfamiliar car, watching the little girl lean against him affectionately, and watching that strange woman gently buckle his seatbelt for him. "Mommy," Julian tugged at her sleeve, his voice filled with a fear she had never heard before. "Is Daddy really never coming back?" Isabella didn't answer. The certainty she had felt before coming here was now completely gone. This time, it seemed they had truly and completely lost him. Ethan stood on the terrace, watching Penny water the flower bed in the yard below. The little girl, dressed in a sunny yellow dress, hummed a tuneless song as she skipped about, looking utterly content. "What are you thinking about?" A pair of warm arms wrapped around him from behind, and Clara rested her chin gently against his back. She still smelled faintly of hospital disinfectant, clearly having just returned from work. "I was thinking," Ethan couldn't help but smile before he even turned around, "about the first time we met, when you brought Penny in to buy picture books." Clara chuckled softly, her eyes full of warmth. "Even back then, I was thinking, how is my junior still so handsome after all this time?" "Such a flatterer," Ethan laughed, delighted. Their laughter caught Penny's attention in the yard. The little girl dropped her watering can and flew up the stairs like a little butterfly. "Auntie Big Bro Ethan, what secrets are you two whispering?" Clara bent down and picked up her niece, kissing her dirt-smudged cheek. "I was asking Big Bro Ethan if he's willing to stay with us forever." Penny's eyes lit up instantly, and she grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Really? Is Big Bro Ethan going to stay with us forever?" Ethan's heart felt as if it had been soaked in warm water. He took Penny from Clara and, under the little girl's hopeful gaze, nodded. "If Penny wants me to." I do," Penny cheered, throwing her arms around his neck, then turning to Clara. "Auntie, hurry up and put the ring on him just like on TV." The tips of Clara's ears turned pink. She took a small, red velvet box from her pocket and handed it to him. "Ethan Sterling," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "will you?" "I will," Ethan answered firmly before she could even finish the question. His eyes were filled with tears, but his lips were curved into a happy smile. Their wedding was set for 3 months later. On the day of the wedding, the sun was exceptionally bright. Clara, in a simple white wedding dress, holding a bouquet of wildflowers picked by Penny, walked towards Ethan amidst the blessings of their friends and family. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Penny eagerly threw herself into his arms and cried out a clear, bright uncle behind the crowd of guests. 3 lonely figures stood, one large and 2 small. "I'll handle it," Clara squeezed his hand, her voice a soothing whisper. "No, I'll go myself." Ethan took a deep breath and walked to the entrance. The moment the door opened, Chloe rushed forward. "Daddy, you look so handsome today." Ethan stepped back, avoiding her hug. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. Isabella's gaze fell on the wedding ceremony behind him. Her voice was hoarse, her eyes filled with a mixture of nostalgia and longing. "We don't mean any harm. We just wanted to wish you well." "I don't need it," Ethan's voice was calm. "Please leave." His voice was not loud, but it was firm. The color drained from Isabella's face. She reached out to pull back her 2 wailing children, a look of desperation in her eyes. "Julian, Chloe, let's go." "No," Chloe broke free from her mother's grasp and threw herself at Ethan's legs, crying hysterically. "Daddy, please look at me, just look at me." Ethan looked down at the daughter he had once cherished in his arms. He didn't bend down, only gently pried her small hands away. "Goodbye, Chloe, and you too, Julian. Don't come looking for me again. Go live your new lives. I have my own new life to live now." As he turned, he heard Isabella's suppressed sobs and the children's heart-wrenching cries behind him. But when he walked back into the ceremony and saw Penny running towards him with a small flower basket, and Clara standing in the sunlight, smiling at him, those sounds became distant and indistinct. Later, Ethan heard from the old butler that things were not going well for the Westwoods. After Sebastian was kicked out, the house was a mess. Isabella was buried in work, and the 2 children were sent to boarding school, their behavior growing more and more erratic. They had tried to come to Havenwood to find him again, but were stopped by security at the entrance to his community. Sometimes, Ethan would dream of the past. He would dream of the sleepless nights he spent watching over Julian during a high fever, of the children's smiling faces the first time they called him Daddy. When he woke up, Clara would always sense it immediately, holding him close and comforting him softly. "Ethan, do you ever regret it?" she asked hesitantly one time. Ethan looked at the 2 stray cats playing with Penny in the yard and shook his head. "My life now is very happy. The future is bright. I won't look back." Just then, Penny ran over, holding the 2 small cats, her face smudged with grass. "Uncle," she asked happily, "they're so cute, can we keep them?" "Of course we can," he said with a smile, lovingly stroking Penny's sweat-dampened face. "This is our home. You're the boss." Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the 3 of them. The darkness that had once shrouded him would never touch him again.